If you've got kids that are very much in wood energy and you are being nurturing in basically earth energy, and then they suddenly become fire energy, and you've been like, nurturing, and you suddenly have to go from the earth energy to metal energy, which means like, no, here's the rules, right? Like this is how you need to do things. Well, guess what? Fire will always melt metal, right? So you're always going to lose that one. Right? So we actually started running our camps for kids where we actually started looking at purpose instead, right? So like if you've got teenagers, they're going to be asking the question why, and if you actually can be counterbalancing with that purpose, because if you don't give them purpose, they'll find purpose somewhere else, right? Or they'll lose purpose altogether. So really being aware that like how we shift is so important. So I was kind of showing this, and I was like, okay, so we get from 14 to 21, and in every single culture, 21 is like a rite of passage from those first 3 sevens, right? So if you happen to, again, have kids in those areas, it's really important to know, well, they're trying to complete at one stage to get to the next stage. Now, if you happen to get through your fire stage and you actually have found some level of purpose, and you get to 21, you go from 21 to 28, and 21 to 28 is where you actually go from fire to earth, which is family years. And the number of people I know that will be in their 20s, still partying away like crazy and thinking they're in their fire years, then they suddenly get to like 27, 28, and they realize all their friends are all basically settled down, starting a family, right? And if you don't, by the time you get to 28, actually have like a partner and you actually don't have a family, you start creating a gap, and then you start basically trying to backfill into that gap, right? So you see a lot of people that get to a point where they haven't yet kind of settled down or got themselves organized with a family, and then they're going, well, I'm just going to spend more time with my parents, right? Like they just have this need to go back and start reconnecting in a way they weren't when they were actually trying to get free during their 5 years. So this is super interesting, because then it's like, oh, that's no wonder my family's acting in that way, or no wonder there's that person in my company that basically is always out partying and now is basically like wanting to settle down. But understanding that is like super, super valuable, because we're all going through the same river. Now, if you get to 28 and you're basically in your earth years, then from 28 to 35, which are basically your metal years, these are the years where you now are basically looking to create a career, where it's like, right, okay, I want something which is more solid. I want to make something that's going to really like work for me. And this is also really interesting, because for some people it's like, why are you suddenly all of a sudden like interested in your career or what you need to be doing or generating the money that you think you'll work? But this is why this happens. And again, if you're basically trying to do that and trying to start a family, it gets really tricky, right? So understanding how to do one before you get the next is really important. Now, by the time when I got to this story and I was about here, and at that point I was in my early 30s. So my kids, like going through the grass to get to here, they're like, so Mom, Dad, you're there. And we're like, yeah. And they were like, wow, you still got so much longer to go. So we're old already, in our 30s, right? So basically, then from 35 to 42, you're actually going from your metal years to your water years, which means you're going back to water again. And this is super interesting, because if you're in those years where it's like, well, why am I suddenly more interested in purpose again? Like, why am I suddenly needing to know the why again? And have you noticed that a lot of people, if they go from 35 to 42 and they don't get to their why, they go through something called a midlife crisis, right? It's like, okay, I couldn't find a why in my life, so now I'm finding a why in my Ferrari or in my new girlfriend or whatever happens to be, right? So this is basically where you realize that there is like all of these dysfunctions that we go through in life just because we're not in tune with what our journey is and where we are on that journey as well. And so if you actually end up at 42 and you found some level of purpose, and we find so many people who get into our community because they're like, no, I need to find more purpose in what I'm doing, right? By the way, if you're watching social media, you might notice that a lot of the people who are like, hey, I want to be an influencer, I want to be successful, they're all in their 20s or early 30s, and then they're actually looking for more purpose, right? They're looking for, actually, I need something more purposeful than this. And even influencers themselves are then also going, well, what can I do which is more purposeful as well? So if you find yourself actually in that space and going, why wasn't I thinking this way 10, 15 years ago? It's because we all are actually going through different levels of consciousness in the way that we're actually going through this river, right? And we all then are like, oh, okay, so I'm not alone in this, which means we can connect with others doing that too. Now from 42 all the way to 49, you're going from water back to wood again, which means growth. So if you're in your 40s, you know that your whole body is changing more than since you were down being a kid, right? For most of us, the growth isn't so much up as much as out, right? So it's amazing how many people at that age start focusing on their health again. And they start actually saying, I want to learn more about wellness. I want to learn more about my diet. I want to learn more about getting fit, right? And so again, just understanding that even your avatar for your customer base, you can actually start using this as a really simple, easy way for actually knowing there's some people who are much more interested in your products than others based on their actual stage of life, right? Now, it doesn't mean everyone starts exactly at the 40s. Some people do this more in their 50s, some in their 30s, but it's the same stages. After you find your purpose, the next thing is you're going to get back to your health, right? And so this basically then leads from the 49 through to 56, where you're now actually going from, again, the idea of growth to fire, and almost always in this area, when you're actually going through kind of end of 40s into early 50s, you're building a whole new community again, right? Like a whole new group of people at a different level that you want to be around. And then if you actually then go through that level, 56 to 63, that's where you now go fundamentally back to family, which is where you actually are at grandparenting years, right? It's like where now it's like, oh, I want to hang out with my kids. And if you actually get to 64, which is now beyond grandparenting. Have you heard that Beatles song, When I'm 64, or When We're 64? It's like, okay, so the kids are growing up, the grandkids are growing up, it's just us, this is it, right? And when that happens, you're actually now going from the earth energy, and you're going back to metal, when you're like, right, I'm now going to be focusing not so much on getting as on giving, right? Some people become basically, useful from the point of view of being a mentor, right? Some people become more useful joining boards of directors, right? Or advising others. But that's what actually happens from that 63 through to 70. And then from 70, you're then going here, where you're going from 70 to 77, and you're actually going back again to the wood energy, but the wood energy now is the wood energy, the spirit energy, but the spirit energy now is the energy of finding what happens next, right? It's like, okay, I'm about to die, I'm going to die soon. If I don't believe in God now, I better do it quickly, right? It's like I better figure out something, because something's going to happen after this happens. And so you see a lot of people at that age basically really go much back into spirit, and then that then takes us from where we had the Buddha here in the water down to the final 7, which is basically wood, which is now no longer about generation, it's about degeneration, and the actual speed with which the body actually then falls apart is mind-blowing at that age, right? Now, if you actually just keep a note of this, and you think every one of the 7 billion people on the planet is just a drop in the river, and we're all part of that same journey, well then we stop thinking that we have to be that own drop, right? And we start realizing that we're all part of that river as well, and realizing that we're not alone, and there's generations before us that have already passed into the sea, and the generations after us which are actually behind us as well. So for us, like every droplet, our job is to just make the river's path a more interesting path for the next drops that are coming our way as well. The other thing is that these 7 different years are the 7 colors of the rainbow, which is really important as well. So for me, for example, where I know, okay, well, I've just finished with my earth years, right? I've stayed healthy, like through the pandemic, gone on marathons, triathlons, all that kind of stuff. I'm not doing that as much anymore because I'm quite happy with my health. But from 49 all the way through to basically 56, I know I'm going from the idea of basically having that energy at the wood energy back to fire, which is connecting with all the right people that I want to be connecting with around the world, and I'm doing a lot of that right now, right? But also knowing that from 49 I've gone 50, 51, 52, 53, I'm 4 years in, which means I've already gone through red, right? I've already gone through orange, I've already gone through yellow, I'm now on my green level with fire. And so that's super interesting as well, because you realize that you can take the whole of your life as basically time where everything is the same, every year is the same, or you can treat it as a series of rainbows. And if you treat it as a series of rainbows, it totally changes the way you start thinking about your life, and there's color in every day. The other thing I wanted to share, as well as that story, which is we're all on there, right? Because you're all on there at some point, and you want to think, well, which is the stage you're on? Is I want to share with you my most favorite statue in this whole place, which really kind of like sums up why we even call this Vision Those. But before I do that, I'd like you to please just take a moment, turn to the person next to you and say, based on what I just shared, and based on your current age, which one of these different stages, like, are you more in the earth stage? Are you more in the fire stage? Are you more in the metal stage? Based on this system, are you in right now? And what distinctions show up for you as to how true is this for you at all? Are you actually feeling this in some way or not? And what is the stage that's coming next for you? Take a moment, turn to the person next to you. Don't